So I've been on the struggle bus when it comes to reading lately, and instead of taking this time to read, I'm going to spend it planning more books that I want to read. Hi everyone, my name is Maddie and welcome back to my channel, or thanks for joining us if you're new here. Today we are going to be talking about withcindy's Asia Readathon that she's putting together for the month of May, because it is Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month? Awareness Month? What's the technical language about it? Let's clarify that. Heritage Month. There we go. So it's a month-long readathon dedicated to reading books by Asian authors, and it's an online event that's meant to be super easy and super accessible for everyone. So there are 5 different challenges, but the twist is that you can combine challenges, put them together, but each book has to be from an author of a different Asian background. So I thought it would be kind of fun to sit down, talk about it a little bit, because ultimately I just want to read books that are written by really good authors, but also it's really important to make sure that you're reading authors from diverse perspectives. One of the things that I like that Cindy really talks about in her video is the fact that, like, just because you read diverse authors doesn't make you a better person or an activist. I know that was a conversation with the Black Lives Matter movement that's ongoing, but when it really came to a height with George Floyd's murder last year, is this idea that it's not enough to just be not racist, you need to be actively anti-racist. While reading really diverse books is great, it's also super important to take part in other activities and really do the research and work to educate yourself. So Cindy's also doing some giveaways where she's really encouraging people to donate to charities that support Asian Americans or Asian people in whichever country that you're from. So I would also recommend checking that out. The document has some lists to some resources or charities, or you can do some research on your own, which is great. Educate yourself, learn about what's in your region, learn about the issues that are going on in your country, and see what you can do to help. I will link her video and any of the resources and anything I talk about down below. But otherwise, let's pick some books. So, the first challenge is read any book by an Asian author. I think I'm going to do This Is How You Lose the Time War, which is written by 2 people, but one of the authors is Lebanese Canadian, I believe. So I will be doing that book. For those who don't know, the description is: among the ashes of a dying world, an agent of the Commandant finds a letter. It reads, "Burn before reading." Thus begins an unlikely correspondence between 2 rival agents hell-bent on securing the possible future for their warring factions. Now what began as a taunt, a battlefield boast, grows into something more, something epic, something romantic, something that could change the past and the future, except the discovery of their bond would mean death for each of them. There's still a war going on after all, and someone has to win the war. So the romance element of this is a little off to me, but it was recommended by a graphic novel webcomic writer artist that I love, so I've been meaning to check it out. So that's another one that was on my TBR that I was like, perfect. I didn't even realize that when I bookmarked it. I think I know which book that I'm going to pick for the second one. So read any book featuring an Asian protagonist. This graphic novel was up for the Goodreads Choice Awards last year, and I'm not quite sure if it won, but it is by Trung Lee Nguyen. Follows Tien, who loves his family and his friends, but he has a secret that he's been keeping from them, and it might change everything. So it says, real life isn't a fairy tale. He still enjoys reading his favorite books with his parents and the books he borrows from the local library. It's hard enough trying to communicate with your parents, but for Tien, he doesn't have the right words because his parents are struggling with their English. Is there a Vietnamese word for what he's going through? Is there a way to tell them he's gay? So this book obviously features a Vietnamese protagonist, so that's one country checked off the list, and I've been dying to read it. It's actually been on my TBR for a while, and that's kind of how I'm gonna work this challenge a little bit, is try and roll some of my things into the TBR, into focusing on this challenge, in order to be able to get to read some really great novels by some Asian authors. So this will be my book that features an Asian protagonist. Number 3 is read any book written by an Asian author in your favorite genre. This one is hard for me because honestly, I don't have a favorite genre. I read a lot of horror and I read a lot of thrillers, maybe something along those lines, but I'm also trying to keep things different. So what I'll actually pull up for this one, and I'll cut the screen over to that, is this really great story graph that Cindy has put together and that everyone is able to contribute to. So this is on Storygraph, which is kind of like Goodreads. I've heard a lot of really great things about it. I've used it briefly, and I believe it's also Black owned, so that's great because it's not really owned by Amazon. I know it's tricky because a lot of people use Goodreads, but the really cool thing about the way that this has been laid out, they've split it up into books by Asian authors of different genres, and then if you go further down, it's also split up into the different countries. So that way if you're like, okay, I need a book that's not by an author from XYZ country that you've already have a book from, then you can look at the list. So let's check out let's go with thrillers. Celeste Ng, I've been wanting to read books by that author, but I do already have an author picked out for one of the later prompts who is Chinese, so I gotta pass on that one. Battle Royale, I've actually never read that one. I don't know what authors that would be by. There's a lot of manga on here, I've noticed, which I mean, makes sense. Manga? Let's look at horrors. Let's see if there's any horrors. Because like one of the things that I do find a little bit it's not weird about the challenge, it's just I feel kind of weird is then like I'm like looking up authors to try and figure out like what country they're from, which then feels weird because I'm kind of like cyber stalking them in some way. So that's a me thing. Okay, there's two here that look interesting, so let's look at these ones. This one's is called Earthling. Natsuki isn't like other girls. She has wanted a transformation mirror. She might be a witch or an alien from another planet. Together with her cousin Yue, Natsuki spends her summers in the wild mountains of Nagano, dreaming of other worlds. When a terrible sequence of events threatens to part the two children forever, they make a quiet promise: survive no matter what. Now Natsuki is grown. She lives a quiet life with her asexual husband. Gotta love that ace rep. Surviving as best as she can by pretending to be normal, but the demands of Natsuki's family are increasing. Her friend wonders why she's still not pregnant, and dark shadows from her childhood are pursuing her. Fleeing the mountains, Natsuki prepares herself for a reunion with Yue, but will he still remember their promise, and will he help her keep it? That sounds really good. I'm gonna write down, check out the other one too, and then that way I can double check countries of origins for these authors so that I'm not cheating. Honestly, I get so much joy out of like planning things for these readathons. It's a lot. I'm such a nerd. This one's called The Vegetarian. Before the nightmare, Young Hae and her husband lived an ordinary life. Also, I'm just going to apologize if I pronounce any of these names wrong. I'm doing my best. I'm gonna get better because I know it's important to actually take the time to learn how to say people's names right, because it's super annoying when people don't do that. But for now, I'm just gonna go off of these, and I will get better, I promise. But when splintering, blood-soaked images start haunting her thoughts, Young Hae decides to purge her mind and renounce eating meat. In a country where societal mores are strictly obeyed, her decision to embrace a plant-like existence is a shocking act of subversion, and as her passive rebellion manifests in ever more extreme and frightening forms, scandal, abuse, and estrangement begin to send her spiraling into the spaces of her fantasy. In a complete metamorphosis of both mind and body, her now dangerous endeavor will take her impossibly, ecstatically, tragically far from her once known self altogether. I'm not a vegetarian, but this one also sounds interesting. I'm gonna try and see if the Earthlings will fit, and then if not, we will try this one out instead. Okay, so I just did a quick little Google, and Earthlings is by Seaki Murata, who is a Japanese writer, and I don't have Japan yet, so that works. So far we have The Magic Fish, which is Vietnam, and we have Earthlings, which is Japanese. Next category. Read any nonfiction book written by an Asian author. This was one that I already have picked out, who is a Canadian author. His parents are Chinese immigrants, and this is Goodbye Again by Johnny Sun. And it is a collection of essays about kind of living life where you're constantly saying goodbye to people, if you're constantly like moving or being pushed from place to place. He also did Everyone's an Alabin When You're an Alabin Too, which is one of my favorite books of all time. This book just came out and I want to read it anyways, so what a perfect opportunity to roll this into this reading challenge as well. So the very last one that I need to pick then is a book by an Asian author that is not US centric. If we go back to the Storygraph reading list here. Let's scroll down. I'm gonna try and pick a country that I don't think I've really read anything from before. And honestly, some of these I'm like, I don't even recognize the names of the country. Let's look at Kuwaiti authors. All I Want to Forget, Silence is a Sense, The Pact We Made. Okay, so that one takes place in the UK, so it's not US centric, but I want to try and read something that takes place, I guess, in the country that it's written. Let's go Sri Lankan. I don't know much about Sri Lanka, except that the tsunami hit there. Marriage of a Thousand Lies. Sri Lankan American. There's so many books that take place in America. Wait, Michael Ondaatje is Sri Lankan? Is he? You learn something new every day. I'm gonna Google that. I always thought he was British. He's a Sri Lankan born Canadian poet. Oh, he's Canadian. I didn't even know that. I didn't know he was Sri Lankan. Well, you learn something new every day. Okay, let's look at Michael Ondaatje. I've never read The English Patient. Heard a lot about it, but let's look at Michael Ondaatje's books. Let's get some Canadian things in. Though I guess we're trying to find a book that takes place not in Canada. Yeah, so this is a problem because they're all taking place in Canada. Though I guess that would be a Canadian perspective and not an American perspective. This is harder than I thought. There's a lot of really cool books on here though. So there's one that my mom really likes. I'm trying to remember where it takes place. Okay, so I looked up the Red Tent and the Kite Runner, and I think I'm gonna pick the Kite Runner just because I think my mom owns that book. I've heard it is quite sad, so I'm going to emotionally prepare myself for that. But the plot of that one is the unforgettable, heartbreaking story of the unlikely friendship between a wealthy boy and the son of his father's servant. The Kite Runner is a beautifully crafted novel set in a country that is in the process of being destroyed. It's about the power of reading, the price of betrayal, and the possibility of redemption, and an exploration of the power of fathers over sons, their loves, their sacrifices, their lies. So it is a sweeping story of family love and friendship told against the devastating backdrop of the history of Afghanistan over the last 30 years. The Kite Runner is an unusual and powerful novel that has become a beloved, one-of-a-kind classic. So this is one that I think gets taught in school quite a bit, but I have never read it before, so that will be my last one. So just to go back and go over everything that I read. So reading a book written by an Asian author, that is going to be This Is How You Lose the Time War, which is by a Lebanese-Canadian author. Read any book featuring an Asian protagonist. It's going to be The Magic Fish, which features a Vietnamese protagonist. Read any book written by an Asian author in your favorite genre. I picked that book Earthlings, which is by a Japanese author. A nonfiction book written by an Asian author is the Chinese-Canadian author Johnny Sun. His memoir, a collection of essays, I guess. Goodbye Again, and that will be one that I'm super looking forward to reading. And then number 5, read any book written by an Asian author that's not US centric, and that is going to be The Kite Runner, which takes place in Afghanistan. So we did it. I'm not going to combine any of the challenges. I might end up having to like roll some of them together. I think I could definitely put the ones like written by an author and featuring an Asian protagonist together, but I want to try and challenge myself to do a different book for each one. I noticed when I was looking at some of the page numbers on Storygraph that they were a little bit shorter, so hopefully that will help. And the only other reading challenge I've done before has been in a week, so this should be a lot easier for me because I will actually have a whole month to do this. I know this video is a little bit all over the place. I kind of like being able to sit down and like talk through my thoughts with you guys. If that's a little too chaotic, let me know. That's something that I can definitely work on for other reading challenges. Anyone is interested in taking part in this, I will put the link to Cindy's video down below, as well as the link to the Google Doc that she made that has all of the great information to take part in it. So that is awesome, super exciting. If you do choose to take part in it, leave me a comment, let me know what books that you're reading. I'm always super happy to hear about new books that people love or rediscovering new authors. If you like these kind of reading, discussing TBR videos, please leave me a comment about that too. Otherwise, make sure you like and subscribe and ring that bell so you get notifications. I will also leave my Goodreads and my art Instagram down below if you'd like to follow me there. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Until then, stay kind.